Hi students, this is your teacher, Kareen, talking to you remotely about muscular skeletal changes with age. So get your popcorn ready, get your pajamas on, get all comfy, and enjoy the lecture. Okay, so we have had many medical advances that help with lifespan and life quality. However, with regards to muscle mass and healthy muscle aging, things have been overlooked. And having muscle helps elderly to have their freedom and independence to live alone. So with that, the lack of muscle significantly reduces their ability to live alone. The loss of muscle, as well as the loss of this ability to live by oneself, is kind of a spectrum. In the beginning, you can see this man is walking with some assistance and a cane. Then there's a woman who's sitting in front of a walker. There's a man in a wheelchair, so he's still able to get around, however he needs a wheelchair. And then this last picture is a female who is bedbound or immobile. And the more that these disabilities occur, and to the more extreme extent, the higher impact on quality of life and the more need for reliance on others. So, why is muscle important in the elderly? Specifically, it helps them recover from illness or trauma. Muscle is a very protective tissue in our body. It allows them to carry out the ADLs. So getting dressed, getting out of bed, going to the toilet, shopping, cooking, etc. It allows them to maintain their independence, living alone and being mobile, transferring from bed to chair or from bed to couch or standing up in the kitchen, not having to go to a nursing home to be cared for. By the numbers, 54% of non-institutionalized elderly report one or more disabilities, and 73% of those over 80 report one or more disability. A disability is any restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity in the manner or range considered normal for a human. Muscle loss may lead to debility and disability. So I mentioned disability. Debility is physical weakness, and it's often the result of illness. So somebody might be described as having a debility if they're weak or frail or they fatigue very easily. Muscle loss. So in aging, we do see muscle loss that happens. And this is because there's no longer a balance between how much protein we synthesize or how much muscle protein we're making and how much we're breaking down. We can categorize muscle loss as either sarcopenia or cachexia, which you should have read about in your articles. So sarcopenia or cachexia. Cachexia. You guys know I'm fantastic at writing. And both of these things have the same implications. So both are loss of muscle mass. However, one of them is more disease related, and that particular one is cachexia. And we'll talk about both of these in quite a lot of detail coming up. So cachexia is related to disease. That means cachexia is muscle loss happening when somebody is sick, has undergone, a surgery, maybe had a cancer, has inflammation in their body. And cachexia is muscle loss that cannot be restored nutritionally. So you can't put this person on a high protein diet and expect that muscle to rebuild right away. Some possible diseases are cancer, COPD, kidney disease. I'm just going to put CA for cancer, COPD. This is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Kidney disease is very common to have cachexia. There's a lot of inflammation that goes on with kidney disease. Diabetes DM, and Parkinson's, and HIV/AIDS, and multiple sclerosis, and HIV. So these are just some diseases that are commonly associated with cachexia. One of the most common is cancer, which I abbreviated CA. And with cachexia, you have a high degree of inflammation, and you'll be able to measure this by something called inflammatory cytokines, which are in the blood. And one specific one is called tumor necrosis factor. That's just one, for example. Both cachexia and sarcopenia cause muscle loss, and both do decrease quality of life. However, cachexia is less treatable than sarcopenia, since cachexia is associated with these inflammatory and disease states. Sarcopenia. So sarcopenia does occur with healthy aging. So somebody does not have to be sick to have sarcopenia. This is an unfortunate natural occurrence with aging. And in sarcopenia, we have a loss of the muscle fibers and reduction in the size of those fast twitch fibers. This accelerates starting at age 25. So possibly a few of you have actually started to experience some of this. I know me, age 36, I definitely feel that I have. And so this is really quite alarming. And so it's important that we recognize this occurrence and then kind of identify some strategies to reduce our muscle loss. So between age 20 to 50, 10% is lost. And then by age 80, up to 40% can be lost. And actually, when 40% of muscle loss happens, one can actually pass away because those respiratory muscles needed for lung expansion could be atrophied and not adequate to enable lung expansion and contraction. This is a biopsy, or not a biopsy, but a kind of a cross-section of a thigh in somebody. This white part right here is meant to represent the femur, and the dark part is muscle. So anytime you see this dark gray, that represents muscle. The white part is fat. And so with age 25, you can see a much higher proportion of muscle. At age 63, the size of the leg is exactly the same as the 25-year-old leg, but it's a lot fattier. And so where there was muscle, that has been replaced by fat. And this is very common to see in sarcopenians. In fact, this would be one way to diagnose sarcopenia. Statistics. This is nutrition and aging. Of course, it increases with age. Pretty high percentiles, especially with advancing age. And with advancing age specifically, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. It is more prevalent in men than women. So, and this is with older age specifically. So there's kind of this line here on this graph. The white or clear bars represent women, and the dark bars represent men. And so the older people get, the more likely men are to have sarcopenia than women. So I'm going to put men versus women. And so this is not necessarily true for the younger years, but the older that we get, that is true. So for example, at age 85 to 89, 75% of men will have sarcopenia versus 54% of women. So you would definitely want to know that. Additional statistics, sarcopenia is very closely related to disabilities because with loss of muscle mass, people are unable to do things that they normally could, such as getting out of bed, walking. They're also at higher risk for falls, and falls can lead to fractures, which we're going to talk about soon. Costs of sarcopenia. So I like to kind of mention this. The average cost spent on sarcopenia per year, so this would be like Medicare dollars that are spent, $18.5 million per year. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. Billion with a B. Billion. So that's for sarcopenia. How many of you had heard about sarcopenia before this lecture? Maybe not that many of you. Osteoporosis. How many of you have heard about osteoporosis? Osteoporosis, 16 billion. So even though we have all heard about osteoporosis, we actually spend more money trying to treat sarcopenia, which is a relatively unheard of disease, but its effects are quite more expansive and more expensive. Causes of sarcopenia. So this is kind of what we know to be the current bottom line in sarcopenia, is there's an imbalance in muscle stimulus or potentially increased breakdown. So I didn't mean to cross that out. That was supposed to be an underline. But anabolic muscle stimuli means building muscles. So you're not building as many muscles or as much muscle with age. And that might be due to you just being more sedentary, so reduced exercise. Or if you are exercising, you don't have as strong of a muscle building response. Or potentially you have insulin resistance or your resistance to amino acids. Or you might have more catabolic stimuli, and catabolic stimuli is going to lead to muscle breakdown. So these are the current kind of hypotheses as to why this happens. Healthcare professionals. So you as future healthcare professionals or people interested in health can definitely play a role. Some things that are important to consider are adequate calories and protein. We've kind of gone back and forth on this protein issue. Remember, elderly do not have a higher RDA for protein. However, higher protein in elderly might be associated with longevity, and it's hypothesized that more protein might be needed due to this sarcopenia. Also, adequate calories, because if you don't have enough calories, you're going to use protein for energy instead of for muscle synthesis, and elderly commonly have low appetites, so getting adequate calories might be an issue. Physical activity, if you want to go into kinesiology or become a exercise physiologist, you can be the one to recommend physical activity to your patients, and it is absolutely beneficial for sarcopenia prevention and maintenance of muscle. If elderly do lose muscle, know that this could happen anywhere. So I've been talking a lot about oral health, and I've reminded you that muscle loss can happen in the mouth. It doesn't necessarily only happen in the legs or the arms or kind of some of the bigger muscles that we think about, but it can happen in the jaw, it can happen in the tongue, it can happen anywhere in the body, in the fingers, you know. So this is a visual showing how activity and active lifestyle can help reduce sarcopenia. Again, we have a cross section of somebody's leg, their quad muscle, and dark color represents muscle, white represents fat. The top is a 40-year-old triathlete. The middle, 74-year-old sedentary man, which would probably represent the majority of men at 74. The bottom, 70-year-old triathlete. So 70-year-old triathlete, I would even go out on a limb and say looks even better than this 40-year-old triathlete. Very, very, very low percentage of body fat surrounding this muscle. The muscle is making up about 99% of this person's leg as compared to their sedentary counterpart. So exercise can absolutely help. And when this is combined with adequate diet, it's really a recipe for protein preservation as well as muscle building. Another diagram. So this is looking at a 92-year-old. So you are never too late to start as long as your doctor says it's okay. But 92 years old, that's just fantastic. This is 12 weeks of knee extensor and flexor muscle exercises. and this person's muscle increased 44%. And so by introducing exercise in addition to diet, you can gain back muscle that has previously been lost, as well as potentially prevent muscle from being lost in the first place. In addition to this exercise, there are definitely some important dietary components. And in your article number 6, which you should have turned in last week, you should have read about some of these dietary components. I already mentioned adequate calories. I already mentioned adequate or potentially higher protein. Having adequate levels of vitamin D is important. They do show reduced muscle mass in people who have low levels of vitamin D. Diet rich in antioxidants is beneficial. However, with supplement of antioxidants, we have not seen the same results. And in fact, we've actually seen some negative results. So better to have diet versus supplements of antioxidants. Something called HMB and creatine might be helpful supplements for muscle maintenance and stabilization. And omega-3 fatty acids are also supposed to be important. They might support lean tissue as well as reduce any sort of inflammation that could contribute to muscle loss. And overall, a Mediterranean diet, a diet rich in fruits and veggies, a diet high in fiber seems to be beneficial for maintaining muscle. Okay, so moving away from muscle and now looking at some of our skeletal health. Skeletal health depends on bone mass, and bone mass is related to bone density. So kind of how thick, how strong our bones are. The majority of this is determined genetically, but there are many lifestyle and nutritional factors that play a role. And so we really need to kind of maximize the influence of these to maintain peak bone health. You guys, as far as I know, are all under age 28. So when is your time to focus on your bone growth? Your time is now. My time is too late. I'm in old lady bone declining status, but you guys are not. And so pay attention, take notes, and then go eat healthy foods as well as do weight-bearing exercise to support your bones. You are never going to regret having healthy bones later in life, or you're never going to regret the habits that you had to have healthy bones later in life. You might be regretful like me, though, for not having those habits. I was not a nutrition major as my undergrad. I did not take a nutrition class until my mid-20s, maybe even my late 20s, let's say my late 20s. And so I was not doing some of these things. Okay. Rate of bone loss. It varies from one site to another, and it's dependent on lifestyle. So these are all modifiable things that you can change, mostly. So body weight. You want to be at a healthy weight. If you are underweight, you are not going to be putting as much pressure on those bones, and it's actually negative to bone health. Weight-bearing exercise. I'm just going to put weight exercise because it's really hard. Exercise. Okay, I know the writing's horrible, but it's really hard to write on this computer keypad. Weight-bearing exercise. Things like tobacco. Don't do it. Alcohol. I'm going to put ETOH. Not good for the bones. Don't do it. Or if you have to, moderation. Illness, medications also contribute, as well as dietary status. So vitamin D, calcium, adequate calories, adequate protein, vitamin K2, vitamin A. These are all important to bone health. For women, we unfortunately go through menopause, which is a non-modifiable risk factor. And with menopause, there are hormonal changes that cause us to lose bone mass at a faster rate than men. Okay, so what is osteoporosis? I'm sure many of you already know, but osteoporosis is a thinning of the bone and a weakening of the bone. And so you have less of the bone structure, more of these kind of holes between the bone. The bone is at higher risk of breaking. I have here, even without trauma, I have had patients who sat on the couch, no pain, literally got up from the couch, heard a crack, and have broken their hips with just that amount of effort. So very, very, very delicate position these people are in. Common joints affected, hip, also wrist, ooh, my writing is creative, wrist and spine. Which your last article, you're actually going to read about changes in height, and many of those have to do with osteoporosis. However, it can affect any part of the body. And so I've already mentioned that it can affect the jaw as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, types of osteoporosis. Osteoporosis can be classified as either a primary osteoporosis or a secondary osteoporosis. A primary osteoporosis occurs as a result of accelerated bone loss or suboptimal peak bone mass. So either you never attained a very good peak bone quality, or you started losing it at a faster rate. That would be considered a primary osteoporosis. A secondary osteoporosis is usually accelerated bone breakdown, and it's usually due to meds or disease. Or that secondary osteoporosis could be reduced peak bone mass due to meds or disease. Meds that commonly cause a secondary osteoporosis, or not medications, sorry, diseases that commonly cause a secondary osteoporosis include kidney failure, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, liver disease, anorexia. And there are many steroid meds that can cause osteoporosis, as well as the medications used in transplant recipients can cause osteoporosis. How is osteoporosis diagnosed? So osteoporosis is diagnosed using something called a T-score. And the T-score is going to compare BMD, or bone mineral density, with the average of young adult females. And so you definitely would want to be familiar with what T-scores mean. A person is considered to have a normal T-score if their T-score is anything greater than -1. And so we're going to see a chart of this coming up that should help make sense of this. They're considered to have low bone mass if they are less than -1, but greater than -2.5. They're considered to have osteoporosis if they are less than -2.5, and severe osteoporosis if they are less than -2.5 and a fracture. As far as low bone mass goes, let's see. Sorry, screw that. Sorry. Low bone mass is sometimes referred to as osteopenia. Osteopenia. So yes, that is sometimes referred to as low bone mass. And again, we'll see this on a chart coming up. So the T-score is your bone density compared with what is considered normal in a healthy young adult of your gender. So there are different T-scores for males and females. And the T-score is the number of units, called standard deviations, that your bone density is either above or below the average. So this is kind of a chart of how a T-score looks, and this bell curve. The bell curve is meant to represent the entire population falling under the bell curve. And so anybody falling in this range, meaning they have a T-score that is greater than -1, would be considered normal. Anybody who has a T-score between -1 and -2.5, which would be right here, is going to be considered to have osteopenia. And then anybody who is worse than -2.5, let's draw this way, is going to be considered to have osteoporosis. This is the same curve that you just saw, however, looking at different age groups. And when you look at these curves, you can see that as age increases, the percent of people who fall below 2.5 also increases, which means the percent of people who fall below this 2.5 mark, which is right here, are the percent of people who have osteoporosis. So if you look at women age 50, there's only a small percent of the population that falls below that. Age 50 to 59, it gets a little bit bigger. 60 to 69, a little bit bigger. 70 to 79, significantly bigger. And 80, I don't know what's doing that. 80%, it is half of the population. So with increasing age, the chances of having osteoporosis are much higher. Okay, how are we going to prevent this? There are some factors that are modifiable and there are some that are not. So, potentially modifiable, early estrogen deficiency. If a woman enters menopause early, she is going to be in an estrogen deficient state. It is possible for women to use pharmacologic therapies as well as doctor's orders to postpone their menopause, meaning postpone the time at which they become estrogen deficient. I actually have a coworker who is a registered dietitian who is taking pharmaceutical agents under her doctor's supervision to prolong her menstrual cycle into older age so that she does not enter menopause as quickly and therefore she does not experience estrogen deficiency as quickly. Other modifiable risk factors. So if you are not eating adequate calcium and vitamin D, this would be something that you could change. And we're going to talk about that and explore that coming up. Low weight. You do not want to be underweight. Underweight is considered a risk factor for osteoporosis. Inactivity, sedentary lifestyles, lack of weight-bearing exercise are also considered risk factors for osteoporosis. So you want to be as active as safely possible. Low peak bone mass. So this is all of you in my class right now before you are age 28. Do all of these things to make sure you don't have low peak bone mass. You know, get adequate levels of calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A, calories, protein. Do weight-bearing exercise. Don't be sedentary. Keep your body weights healthy. You know, try to not focus on underweight or needing to be skinnier. Keep a healthy body weight. Those are all things you can do to achieve peak bone mass. Smoking, don't do it. There is no reason to do it. It is not good for any of the diseases we ever talk about in this class. And then alcoholism. If you are drinking significantly, potentially cut back because alcoholism can lead to reduced mineral utilization as well as reduced mineral intakes, things such as calcium and vitamin D. Additional risk factors. So these are ones that we won't be able to change. Aging, unfortunately. Gender, females are at higher risk for osteoporosis than males, specifically because of that menopause risk factor. Race, Caucasian and Asian women are at higher risk. Women with smaller body sizes are at higher risk. And then genetics. I already said in the beginning that genetics plays a huge factor into this. So unfortunately, those are things that we cannot change, but we can change all of our modifiable risk factors. Additional risk factors. So these might be things that we can change. So medications, prednisone, this is a steroid type medication. And you may be able to talk to your doctor if you're taking this about moderating your dose or limiting your need to take it. different diseases and disorders. There are different hormonal conditions, gastrointestinal conditions that could reduce your ability to absorb calcium, vitamin D, etc. Anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Anorexia because of low weight as well as low dietary intakes. Bulimia because of altered dietary intakes, potentially reduced absorption due to erratic binging and purging cycles, and then prolonged bed rest. If you are in prolonged bed rest, you are not using your bones or your muscles. You're not doing any weight-bearing exercise on those bones, and those bones actually start to break down. So even having somebody who is on bed rest sit in a chair or, try to stand with a walker is better than nothing. Calcium and vitamin D. So most of our calcium in our body is in our skeleton. That is a review. And unfortunately, females generally do not eat enough calcium. Males tend to get as much calcium as they need. And part of that is that they generally have lower needs and they're eating higher calories in general. Elderly might have reduced calcium absorption due to intestinal changes, even changes with their kidneys and renal function. Your 7th article is going to talk about changes in height with age and this literal kind of shrinking of our elderly people that has to do with compression of the spinal cord as well as some microfractures. Vitamin D. So hopefully you remember why elderly are deficient in vitamin D. If you got that one wrong, there are many reasons why elderly might be deficient in vitamin D. One of them is they might not go out in the sun that much. Second reason, if they do go out in the sun, they might be covered up. They're wearing sunscreen, long shirts, hats, etc. Third reason, even if they do go out in the sun and they're not covered up, their skin is not able to synthesize as much of the precursor to vitamin D as a younger person could. Fourth, their kidneys generally have reduced kidney function. Kidneys are needed to activate vitamin D. With reduced kidney function in age, they can't do that. Fifth, liver is needed to activate vitamin D. Liver shrinks with age. And so with potentially reduced liver function, liver is not able to play that role. They may not be eating as much and they may have seasonal kind of disruptions in vitamin D, but those reasons are not specific to elderly unless you explain to me why they're eating less. So do understand that. Okay, recommended intakes for vitamin D. You do not have to memorize this, but you could remember that for 71 or older, the recommended intakes are higher, and I think I actually already had that on your exam. As far as assessing vitamin D levels, we assess vitamin D by measuring something called serum 25-OHD, and this is a simple blood test that can be done in a lab. If you go get your yearly physical, I highly encourage you to ask your doctor to measure yours. I have always been surprised with how low mine is. Mine is usually around the 30s, and anything less than 30 is considered inadequate. So I'm always surprised that mine isn't higher because I do take supplements. As far as these different levels go, 30 is considered adequate. Adequate. 40 or higher is associated with reduced risk of falls and increased physical performance. So I'm going to put down falls, up. I'm just going to put up P for physical performance. And then 50 or higher is considered optimal risk reduction. Risk reduction for fractures. And so 50 or higher would be what you would strive for. I've also heard other studies that say 55 or higher. Just a kind of fun fact, if you are taking a supplement, you generally need about 1,000 international units to raise your blood levels by 5 points. So if you are severely deficient, you may need to take a pretty high dose supplement. Interestingly, though, in some of these studies of high-dose supplements, some of the higher dose supplements actually contribute to falls versus a more moderate dose supplement. So this would be something you would definitely want to talk to your doctor about and see what their recommendations would be. Okay. In women, why are fractures more common? I feel like I've already addressed this. The main reason is menopause and the hormonal changes with menopause. Within the 5 years following menopause, women are considered calcium insensitive, meaning their bodies don't respond to calcium in their diet by putting that calcium back in the bone. Also, women live longer, so they're more likely to experience this. Also, men tend to have more muscle, and muscle helps protect against falls and fractures. And so multiple reasons that women could be at higher risk than men. This is a projected graph looking into the future, which I think I incorporated this into my class in maybe 2015, and 2020 seemed far away. But now that it is to 2018, 2020 seems quite close. And so it's looking at the prevalence of females, males, and then both sexes as far as low bone mass, which would probably be osteopenia, and then osteoporosis. And this is millions of people. So by the year 2020, it's anticipated that 47.5 million people will have low bone mass and 13.9 million people will have osteoporosis. And you can see that these numbers are significantly climbing and increasing over time. And this is going to put a pretty significant burden on our healthcare system. So while you are young, do what you can to prevent this. Okay, menopause. I've kind of already discussed menopause, but during menopause, we become calcium insensitive. We have increased osteoclast activity. Osteoclasts break down bones. So those are the cells that are responsible for breaking down bones. We're also reabsorbing more bone. That means more of the bone is going into the bloodstream instead of building up. You can reduce the risk of this by giving estrogen. However, there are many risk factors to giving estrogen, so that would have to be on a case-by-case basis. I'm thinking about peak bone mass and talking at the same time. And so really the best thing to do would be to reduce your risk of this in general. And the way you can reduce this is by ensuring that you have the highest peak bone mass going into menopause. So doing things while you're young, like eating healthy, getting enough of those nutrients, weight-bearing exercise. Exercise. So bone mass increases in response to skeletal load. So weight-bearing exercise is very, very important. And interestingly enough, gymnasts have the highest peak bone density of any other athletes because of the impact of many of the kind of jumps and tumbles and even falls that they take. However, do you think we would recommend gymnastics to some of our elderly people? Maybe not. But if you want to be a gymnast early in life, sure, great choice for your bones as long as you're maintaining a healthy weight in that gymnastics career. Food. Of course, food is important. This is nutrition and aging. So what can we do to help with bone loss? Adequate magnesium and potassium have been associated with increased bone density, and they create an alkaline or basic environment for our bones. There's some thought that acidic environments will cause bone breakdown because calcium and phosphorus in the bones can help neutralize acids. And so in theory, if you're eating alkaline type foods, it might reduce bone breakdown. Magnesium and potassium can contribute to those. Potassium has many benefits beyond its alkalinity, as well as magnesium has many benefits beyond its alkalinity, but they're both important components of the diet. Vitamin K, and I want to be more clear on this. This is vitamin K2, not K1, K2. K2 comes primarily from animals. I've discussed it before. However, if you need a vegetarian source of K2, you can get it from some fermented foods. Natto is a fermented soybean, and that is a good source of vitamin K2. And K2 is important because it strengthens bone by helping calcium become incorporated into the bone itself. And interestingly enough, in Japan, vitamin K2 supplements are actually used as one of the main treatments for osteoporosis. And populations that have higher vitamin K2 intakes have reduced osteoporosis risk. So K2 definitely important. B12 and B6 do play a role in DNA synthesis and replication, and so it's believed that they are important for bone. And then sodium, I believe we are still investigating the roles of sodium in bone, but high levels of sodium do lead to higher losses of calcium in the urine. Whether or not this leads to osteoporosis is a little bit hazy right now, but we do see higher loss of calcium. We don't know if our bodies are able to balance that from potentially increased absorption or increased mineralization. Right now, the information that we have with solid evidence is higher sodium does lead to increased calcium loss. Other things, omega-3s. So omega-3s are improved with increased mineral bone density, and populations that eat fish 3 or more times a week tend to have higher bone density than populations who don't. Fish is not only a good source of omega-3s, but if people are eating fish with bones, that's actually a significant source of calcium. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, have similar effect to omega-3s as far as being beneficial for bone mineral density. Protein we need for bone health, and then coffee. We love our coffee, but caffeine. Caffeine can cause a little bit of calcium loss in the urine. However, if you add milk to your coffee, the amount of milk you add, even if it's just a tablespoon or two, is adequate to replace any of those calcium losses in the urine. People who drink 4 or more cups of coffee per day do have higher rates, do have decreased bone mineral densities. This does lead to decreased bone mineral density, but they have not seen that it leads to any sort of changes with fractures. So although bone density was reduced, we don't see that it causes more fractures necessarily. And that's good news for the coffee drinkers. Okay, this is an article. If we were in class live, I would be handing this out or showing it at the front of the room, but since we're not, I put it here. I have not ever asked you about many of the articles I discuss in class. However, this one you will hear about. And so this one I like to talk about because it was such almost like a game-changing article. This article was looking at milk consumption, fracture risk, and all-cause mortality. This was a Swedish study. It was a cohort study. Total, it had over 100,000 participants. So that is huge. And like I said, they looked at milk consumption, fracture risk, and all-cause mortality. For people who drank 3 or more glasses of milk a day, they saw, let's just put up milk equals up mortality, meaning death. And in women, it also led to increased fractures. So what the heck? We have always been taught that milk does a body good, but does it? This study really brought that into question. And so what this study found is there is a sugar in milk called D-galactose. D-galactose has been independently associated with animal models of aging and senescence. And the human equivalent of 1 to 2 glasses of milk, when given to mice, causes senescence, which, if you remember, are age-related changes leading to aging and eventually death. D-galactose is found in milk. However, when they looked at populations who consumed fermented dairy products, such as yogurt or cheese or cottage cheese, or things like that, they did not see the increased risk of mortality, and they did not see the increased risk of fractures. It was primarily with the milk that they saw these issues. And so I do kind of want you to know about this study, because I do think it's a pretty game-changing study with a substantial population base, making it a pretty strong study. Okay, osteoporosis. So what's going to happen? Falls, fractures, and costs. Falls and fractures. Fractures are very serious. They're not a joke in elderly. When an elderly person fractures a hip, they tend to have a shortened lifespan after that. 1 in 4 become disabled, 1 in 5 move to a nursing home, and many become isolated. When they break a hip, they often become more sedentary. As they become more sedentary, their muscle strength declines. As their muscle strength declines and they become more sedentary, their bone mineral density further declines, making them weaker, less able to get out of bed, more at risk for future fractures if they do get out of bed, and reduction in ability for them to perform the IADLs and the ADLs. Okay, hip fractures. That's what I was talking about. Okay, this is just a percent of women who have hip fractures by age, and you can see that with increasing age, the percent of women goes up. This is really just an FYI slide. And then this is an additional FYI slide, but this is looking at the cost of poor bone health, and it's looking in millions of dollars. So fractures from osteoporosis, 1.5 million. It's looking at people hurt each year. So 1.5 million people hurt from fractures, 500,000 people hospitalized, 800,000 people in the ER, 2.6 million people going to the doctor's office because of bone-related problems, and 180,000 people placed in a nursing home because of bone-related problems. So again, this is just an FYI, but this is showing what a significant issue this problem is. Treatments, diet. We've talked about diet already. Exercise. I have mostly talked about exercise. Fall avoidance and meds. I'm not going to cover meds too much in this class. I used to, but I don't think it's super pertinent to nutrition and aging. But you can know that there are medications available for reduction of these things. Okay, so exercise. We are going to watch a little video, and I really, really, really hope that this plays. Okay. And if it doesn't play,
someone said to me recently,
just fast forward this part.
And now here is a man who will show you how to feel better, look better.
So this is Jack LaLanne.
You know, what's all this middle age and all this old?
Jack LaLanne is famous. He holds multiple world records. He was one of the main kind of inventors of the juicing kind of fad and process. He actually lived in Morro Bay. I had the opportunity to meet his wife. He passed away before I got to meet him. He passed away at 2011, aged 96 years old. But he was one of the first fitness pioneers, and his belief in fitness as well as healthy eating really, really created his healthy lifestyle. And so this is a fantastic video about how intervention can help and how you can live a long, healthy lifestyle.
Old age business. You know, what is it? Is there a law somewhere because you're 30 or 35 or 40 years old or 50 or 60 or 70? You have to get in a rocking chair and die?
Jack LaLanne can't afford to die. Wreck my image.
Ready, begin. 1, 2.
That's why I tell people, you only live once. So that's why you should take care of yourself. The exercise is king, nutrition's queen. Put them together, you got a kingdom.
Inhale. Blow it out. Inhale again. 5.
I'm a salesman. Think about it. If you believe in something, you sell it.
Now I have the answer to all of your problems. The new long play, high fidelity, glamour stretcher time record.
Why did Jesus Christ perform all those miracles? To prove that his philosophy worked. If Jack LaLanne's philosophy doesn't work for Jack LaLanne, it's not going to work for you, is it? That's why I did all those incredible feats. When I did the 1,000 chins and 1,000 push-ups, and I towed the 2,000-pound boat from San Francisco across the Golden Gate. Then on my 70th birthday, I towed 70 boats with 70 people on the boats, my feet and hands tied, a mile and a half in Long Beach. This is my workshop. This is where I take care of the most important person on this earth, me. I work out every day for 2 hours. I invented a lot of the equipment's in the gym today. First, weight selector, leg extension machine. I started inventing equipment way back in 1931. Those days, physical fitness, that was unheard of.
Put in the carrots. I'll show you right here.
Yeah,
I'll
go
put the
for it.
carrots in first. Okay. You put this down. The juice comes down here.
So it takes everything raw, whole.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's wonderful.
See how you like it. That's carrot juice.
Beautiful.
Isn't that good?
See what you're doing. You're doing something
really
for
good.
you. And it tastes good while you're doing it. You're putting live, vital food in this live, vital body.
Well, at least we know he likes it.
I'm a selfish person. When I put something in my Jack LaLanne's mouth, I say, what is it doing for me? Am I going to be a better lover for my mate? Am I going to get rid of these aches and pains? Am I going to be better with my family?
Jack, I was wondering whether you could tell me any kind of what I should be doing to live a sort of a long and healthy life. What kind of exercises?
Walking's good, but you got to do it vigorously. Here's how you got to walk, like this. You're walking like this. When you're walking, you go like 1, 2, arms overhead. Push it to the ceiling. You walk. Bring those legs in. Pull that waist in. Just like that. You folks out there, try it. Here we are. Up, down, push. All the way. Don't straighten your arms overhead.
This, like this?
Hit the ceiling.
Jesus.
Like this. Punch it. Punch it. Now you got it. Now when you're walking, see? And pull that gut in. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Straighten them out. You put something into it. Punch the ceiling. Don't you know how to punch? Like this. Boom, 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 boom. Hit the. There you go. Now walk as you're doing it. Your health account, your bank account, they're the same. The more you put in, the more you take out. That's it. Good. Come on.
There are plenty of examples of graceful aging, so why be afraid of it?
Do that while you
All it takes, it seems, is a little commitment and a blender. Jack sure makes it look easy.
There's so much work to be done yet. I can hardly wait for tomorrow to get doing something. Sitting on your big fat backside and thinking, oh, I remember the good old days. And the good old days are this second. This is the moment I've waited for. This is it. This moment controls the next moment. And as I said before, who makes it happen? You.
When I was growing up,
Okay.
my mom
The
would
end of that
exercise every
video.
morning.
Okay. So I love this clip. It is from How to Live Forever, one of my favorite little documentaries. Oh, that's my email. Not quite what I wanted. Anyways, here we go. Back there. So I talked about Jack LaLanne. He's awesome. A true inspiration for good health and good nutrition, being active every day, and how that can extend longevity. Okay. These next slides are looking at making your home safe. So I definitely want you to be familiar with some of these tips. I'm not going to talk about them all, but look at this cluttered house. This is just a fall waiting to happen. So assess your house, assess your elder's house, assess the people you care for's house. Another picture, and that is all. So muscle and bone, very important to successful aging, are associated with being able to maintain independence as well as quality of life. We do lose more bone as well as more muscle when we age. However, there are many diet and lifestyle interventions that we can do to reduce our risks of these things. Vitamin D, calcium, and I would add K2 and vitamin A, as well as omega-3s, all play a role in this. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're going to make your bones healthy now. And I'll see you soon. Bye.